Don't you wish you had a second you for taking photos every time you catch a big fish? I used to. Luckily, I have found a girlfriend who is a photographer. Huh, Kenyon? In this video, I am going to teach you how to make the best man fish photo, no matter what camera you have. Because we've all had this happen. You catch a beautiful fish, but the photos are disappointing. Well, after this video, those days are over. But before I start, I want you to notice that you are watching this video on my brand new YouTube channel with my girlfriend Kenyon.
Hi love! We want to post free film and photography tutorials here every week, but that's only possible with your support. So like this video, subscribe below, and turn on post notifications if you'd like to learn from us.
We are here at the Carp in Belgium, a lake I fished multiple times through a Dutch booking agency called the Carp Specialist.
Please note that we have an incredible amount of respect for the fish, and posing with them in this video is for learning purposes only.
Before I actually show you how it's done, I want to emphasize that photography is a question of taste. You can decide for yourself if these techniques work for you. The man fish photo I'm about to show you is my own style of photography that I have developed over the years. I've divided this video in 5 subjects which are all equally important to achieve the best man fish photo. The first one is lighting, then the composition, posing with the fish, the camera plus the lens we are using, and the settings of the camera. As an extra, I'll give you some more tips to achieve an even better man fish photo.
Before we start actually handling the fish, we have to do some prep work. The first thing we're going to do is decide where we're going to take the photo. As a photographer, I always look around first to decide where the light is coming from. On a sunny day, that's just the direction of the sun. On a cloudy day, like we have now, that can just be in the nearest open space where you're not shadowed by trees.
Once we have decided where the lighting is coming from, then we can look for a space to sit with the fish. As you can see, this forest doesn't produce a lot of light, so it wouldn't be practical to face that way. But it's way better to use all this light facing that way. At this circumstance, it doesn't really make a difference at what angle the light is hitting the fish, because there's so much light available. But when the sun is shining and you have direct sunlight, you want that light to hit the fish at an angle of 45 degrees. This gives a lot of depth and contrast in the subject, and the colors will look the prettiest possible. So, the most important part of the composition is the background. And now we have looked at the lighting conditions, we can choose where we're going to sit and pose with the fish. It is not only you and the fish that appear in the photo. The background provides lots of context and atmosphere for the viewer. So choose a background that is most appealing for the situation. I like to choose something that stands out, like an extra subject in the photo. So I'm looking for subjects that will be interesting in the background. It's kind of grey weather now, so I'm looking for something lighter. And this birch tree really stands out. I think I'm gonna add this in the background. A rule you need to remember is the further away the background, the blurrier it will be. So if you want a blurry background, also called bokeh, don't sit too close to it. Well, Kenyon, does this look good, like this composition?
Yep.
Okay, cool. Let's go get the fish. I'm going to show you my favorite way of posing with the fish. I always keep my knees very close together and I sit back on my heels. This way I'm as low as possible to the ground. There's a very good technique for holding a fish. You see this fin on top here? If you do 2 fingers around the fin, there's a little hole there. And then the other hand just around the fin of just before the tail. Then you have a lot of control over the fish. It is very important to hold the fish close to you and lean forward a little bit. This way both me and the fish will be sharp, but if you push the fish too much forward, you'll see that I get blurry, and that's not what we want. So this is a very realistic way of showing a fish. You can just flap the fish down on your arms if it starts flapping, and this is a very safe and visually appealing way of posing with a fish. I lift the fish with my arms. If you find that too heavy, you can also lift one knee, but make sure you lift the knee on the side of the head of the fish. This is the most pretty way.
To keep all of these things in mind can be difficult, and that is why a photographer comes in handy. He, or she in this case, can give you tips to help make your photo better. Okay, love, can you pick up the fish? Okay. And now raise the tail a little bit. You've got the head too high. Yep, and angle the head a little bit towards me. Sit back on your heels a bit more. Lean forward. Okay, smile. Hi. Beautiful. Nice.
So we just took a photo on land, very quick, because personally I like photos in the water much more. It's a more natural way of posing with a fish. So I always recommend to bring waders for both you and the photographer. So I'm in the water, I have the fish in the sling, but what I like to do is to push the sling away when I'm holding the fish. Since we already have a backup photo on shore, I can just push the sling away and then pose with the fish only. So with the tips I just gave you, I can now make the best man fish photo. Wow, it's such a gorgeous fish. We're very happy with the photos, so now she can go back where she belongs. Top! Okay, now we know our composition and how to pose with the fish, let's talk about the camera and the lens. It's obvious that this 70-200 isn't the best lens for this purpose, so let me fix that real quick. Ah, that looks a lot better. A good old 50mm lens on my full frame Sony camera. And by the way, the shot you're looking at right now is also filmed on a 50mm lens.
Willem said at the beginning that it doesn't matter what camera you use. However, obviously if you use a better camera, you're going to get better photos. But what is most important is the lens you use. As long as you have a camera that can change lenses, you're good to go.
Now I'm going to show you how different lenses look for a man fish photo. From wide angle to telelens, I'm going to show you a 20mm lens, a 35mm, 50mm, 85mm, 105mm. The higher the focal length in millimeters, the tighter the angle of view is. The longer the focal length in millimeters, the blurrier the background will be, but also the smaller the fish will look. Therefore, you want to find a lens that provides you with a blurry background and a realistically sized fish. In the basics, there's one thing you need to know about your camera before you choose a lens, and that's the size of the sensor. The sensor is basically all the millions of pixels that will be transformed into a digital image. On mirrorless cameras, you can see the sensor straight away. On DSLRs, there's a mirror in front of the sensor which flips away when taking a photo. In general, cameras have two different sensor sizes. Cameras with a full width sensor are called full frame cameras, and the cameras with a smaller sensor have a crop factor. The smaller sensor with a crop factor captures a smaller area of the image through the lens. I'll show you what I mean. So this is a 50mm lens on a full frame camera. You can see the shot is perfectly framed, but with my dedicated button for the crop factor you can see the shot is way too tightly framed. So now I have to take a couple of steps back to get the same framing. Again, 50mm on a full frame sensor, 50mm on a crop sensor. You see, the lens didn't change. It is approximately zoomed in 1.6 times because the sensor is 1.6 times smaller. This means to achieve the same framing I have to take a step back. Now the biggest advantage of a full frame camera comes in play. It is a fact that the closer the subject is to the lens, the blurrier the background is. So with a full frame camera you can stay closer to your subject, which makes the background more blurry, also called bokeh. In my opinion, the field of view of a 50mm lens on a full frame camera is the most beautiful and realistic angle of view for a man-fish photo. So to reach the angle of view with a crop camera, you have to divide 50mm by the crop factor 1.6, which leads you to choosing a 30 or a 35mm lens. A 50mm lens would almost have the angle of view of an 85mm lens when used on a camera with a crop factor.
Are you still with us? I know that this is all very complicated, but it's also important to know if you're looking for the perfect lens to make man-fish photos. In conclusion, we recommend a 50mm lens for cameras that are full frame and a 35mm lens for cameras with a crop factor.
Besides the focal length, the angle of view, the most important thing about the lens is the aperture. The lens opening that regulates how much light can pass through. This is expressed in an F number. The lower the F number, the bigger the opening, the more light comes in. Lenses with a low F number, like f1.8, are called fast lenses, because the camera can set a faster shutter speed than with slower lenses like f4. I recommend to choose f2.8 or lower. Better is f1.8 and best is f1.4, but this last option comes with a price tag. A side effect of a low F number is that the depth of field is shallow. The depth of field consists of the area in the photo that is sharp. The focus of the lens decides where it is sharp. Modern cameras have such good autofocus that the focus will always be perfectly on the subject, as long as you set it to the right point. Always make sure the focus point is on the fish. There are plenty of videos that explain to you how the exposure triangle works, but I am going to teach you the easy way of exposing your photos. Every camera has a dial on top with different letters. We need the letter A or AV for Canon cameras. In this mode you can set the aperture to what you want. The F number, remember? You want the f number as low as possible. You do that by dialing the wheel to the left until the f number reaches the minimum of what the lens is capable of. This differs between lenses. The camera will control the other two settings, ISO and the shutter speed. For a man-fish photo in daylight, you don't have to worry about those. The only time you want to set a higher f number, also called stopping down, is when you want to increase the depth of field. So a deeper area in the photo appears sharp. You also want to stop down a higher f number when you do close-ups. The closer the subject is to the lens, the blurrier the background will be. If you do close-ups, the subject comes so close to the lens that the subject itself isn't even sharp anymore. Then you stop down to say f4. You can also take landscape photos at f4 or higher to get everything in focus. Now we have set the aperture, the f number, to what we want. We can also change the exposure if needed. That's simply making the photo darker or brighter by dialing another wheel which sets your wanted exposure. On my Sony camera I have a dedicated wheel for that, and on other cameras you might have to press another button first, like the one that's shown here, and then dial the wheel. For some cameras, I recommend to set your exposure a bit towards the minus on the exposure bar to prevent overexposing and maintaining perfect detail in your photos. But it is important that you look at your photos yourself in playback mode to see if the exposure is correct. Another setting that is very important is one that you must turn off: face detection. Modern cameras have the option to recognize your face in a photo and focus on it. This means you will be sharp, but the fish won't. Make sure you set your focus point manually on the fish, so the fish will always be sharp.
We've almost reached the end of this tutorial, but we have a few more tips to give you. If you haven't already, subscribe below if you would like to see more tutorials from us every week.
When it gets dark, your camera slows down its shutter speed to collect more light. A slow shutter speed can cause motion blur if you are shooting handheld. The solution is to use a tripod and also consider using a flash when you run out of light.
On overcast days, you'll get an unwanted glare on the fish, and this will significantly decrease the details in the scales. You can resolve this using a polarization filter. This always occurs on cloudy days, a little bit like today, so I recommend just always having one with you.
Okay, can I see the photos, Kenyon?
Yep.
Nice. Always keep a towel close to the camera so you don't have to touch the buttons with slimy hands. Oh, that's a nice photo.
Always save your photos in a high resolution. Social media apps are great for sharing your photos with family and friends. But for important things like printing or displaying your photos on a large screen, you don't want to use this downsized file. Use the original file.
Apps like Lightroom are great for improving your photos, but please don't use them for dramatic effects. And also Instagram filters, they don't make up for a bad shot. I'd rather see your photos naturally. My last and most important tip is be critical on your own work, but respect that of others.
We hope that you've learned something from this tutorial. If you want to learn more, subscribe below and turn on post notifications. Also, feel free to leave in the comments what you'd like to learn about.
We'll see you in the next video.
Ha